Hey, it's Dave here. In this video, I'll show you how to automate your external mailbox using Home Assistant so you'll know whenever your mailbox contains post. Let's get started. Before we begin, there's a couple of prerequisites. You'll obviously need Home Assistant, a Zigbee coordinator or hub, and a set of Zigbee sensors. I'll be using a combination of Akara and Sonoff sensors throughout this video, but any equivalent Zigbee contact or PIR sensor should work just as well. One important thing to mention before we continue is that I'll be showing you 3 different solutions for automating your external mailbox, and which one is best for you will depend on the design of your mailbox. All 3 solutions use wireless Zigbee sensors, so they work providing your mailbox is within the range of your Zigbee network. This project is designed for external mailboxes, not letterboxes built into your front door. If you live in a block of flats, for example, you probably have a communal bank of wall-mounted mailboxes, and you don't get to choose the design of that mailbox. Every design is slightly different, so a solution that works perfectly on one mailbox may not work on another. My preferred solution is to use 2 wireless Zigbee contact sensors. The first is fitted to the letterbox flap and is used to detect when post has been delivered, updating the mailbox status to indicate that you've received post. The second contact sensor is fitted to the mailbox door that you open to collect your post. This allows Home Assistant to automatically detect when the mailbox has been emptied and resets its status. However, depending on the design of your letterbox flap, it may be difficult to securely attach a magnet or contact sensor. In my case, the flap had a slight curve, so it wasn't a nice flat surface to mount it. Because it was a communal mailbox, I also couldn't drill holes or make permanent modifications to improve the installation. Over time, I also found that letters being pushed through could eventually knock the magnet off, so it's worth bearing that in mind. That's why I included a second option using a PIR sensor. It's much easier to retrofit and should work with almost any external mailbox. The trade-off is that unlike a contact sensor, a PIR sensor can occasionally produce false triggers. So although it's not quite as reliable, I think it's the best alternative if fitting contact sensors simply isn't practical. Finally, there's a hybrid approach which combines the best of both. It uses a PIR sensor to detect when the post has been delivered, together with a contact sensor on the mailbox door. PIR sensor detects the new mail, while the contact sensor detects you've collected it, allowing Home Assistant to automatically reset the mailbox status. To make it easy to follow along, I'll also be adding timestamps so you can jump straight to the solution that best suits your mailbox. I'd just like to take a quick moment to thank PCBWay for sponsoring this video. If you've watched some of my recent videos featuring custom PCB designs, you'll know that I've been using PCBWay to manufacture them. Alongside PCB manufacturing, they also offer assembly services, CNC machinery, and high-quality 3D printing, making them a great choice whether you're building electronic projects, mechanical parts, or complete prototypes. If you'd like to check out PCBWay for your own projects, you'll find a link in the description. Thanks again to PCBWay for supporting the channel. With that out the way, let's add the Zigbee sensors into Home Assistant. I'll be using Zigbee to MQTT in this example, but if you're using ZHA or another Zigbee integration, the process will be fairly similar. From Home Assistant, if you select Zigbee to MQTT, then click Permit Join, and while that's happening, I'm going to press and hold the button on my first Zigbee sensor. Which you can see is appearing here. And now I'm going to select rename device. And this one I will be using as the mailbox flap. So I'll set it up as that. Check the box to update Home Assistant Entity ID and click rename device. And I'm just going to repeat the same steps for the other sensors. Now I'm going to do this for the door. And that's now appearing. Again, I'm going to click rename device, and this one I will call mailbox door. Check the box, update Home Assistant Entity ID and rename device. And I'm just going to add the third device. You won't need all of these, but it's depending on what setup you're having. So now we're going to add the PIR sensor. So I'm just going to hold down the pairing button. And you can see that is now adding. I'm going to select rename device and call this mailbox motion. Check the box to update Home Assistant Entity ID and select rename device. Now that the sensors have been paired, we need to find their Entity IDs as we'll use them later when creating our automations. Back into Home Assistant, if you go to Settings, Devices and Services, and if you select Entities, and we're going to do a search for mailbox flap. And we're looking under Door, go to Settings, and this is the Entity ID which you'll need for triggering automations. Now we're going to do the same for the mailbox door, which is also under the category door. Back into Settings. There's your Entity ID for the mailbox door. And if I just do the final one, for those of you using the PIR sensor, we do a search for mailbox motion. And it's this one here under occupancy. And you guessed it, back into Settings. You've now got the Entity ID for the mailbox motion occupancy. Now that we've added the sensors into Home Assistant, the next step is to fit them to the mailbox. We first need to decide where each sensor should be positioned, as this will vary depending on which solution you've chosen. Rather than permanently fixing the sensors and magnets in place straight away, I'd recommend temporarily securing them with something like Blue Tack. This makes it much easier to experiment with the positioning and confirm everything is working correctly before securing them permanently. Before we fit the sensors, there's one optional improvement I would like to show you. One thing I don't particularly like with this style of Zigbee door sensor is that if you stick it directly to the mailbox using a supplied adhesive, you'll eventually have to remove it to replace the battery. The problem is that removing a sensor usually means breaking the adhesive, and when you stick it back on again, it's easy to lose the original alignment with the magnet. To solve that, I've designed a small 3D printed sensor mount rather than sticking a sensor directly onto the mailbox. The mount is permanently attached instead, and the sensor simply slides in and out whenever the battery needs replacing, returning it to the exact same position as beforehand and ensuring it's always correctly aligned with the magnet. Don't worry if you don't have access to a 3D printer though, as this is completely optional. You still can stick the sensor directly onto the mailbox if you prefer. I just like this approach because it allows you to remove the sensor, replace the battery, and then slide it straight back into the exact same position without having to realign everything again. I also designed a few optional 3D printed magnet mounts. On my particular mailbox, I found it difficult to position the sensors and magnets close enough together for reliable detection. So these mounts allowed me to bring the magnets slightly closer. They may not be needed for your mailbox, but I'll include the 3D printed files on my GitHub as an optional download in case you find them useful. With that out of the way, I've picked up a cheap off-the-shelf mailbox purely for demonstrational purposes, as it's much easier to film than the communal mailbox I actually use. Let's take a look at where the sensors and magnets should be positioned for each three solutions. For solution 1, you're going to be placing a magnet on the letterbox flap. And then if I just open up the door, the Zigbee sensor is going to be placed nearby so that when you open and close the flap, it's able to make contact and break contact so that the state of the door sensor can change between on and off. You're also going to need a second Zigbee door sensor placed somewhere around here, along with a magnet as well nearby, so that when I open and close the door, it's able to use that as a method to determine the post has been collected. For solution 2, we're going to use this PIR sensor, and you can place it anywhere inside the mailbox like this, and then just close the door. As soon as a letter is posted in the mailbox, you're immediately going to know because the motion sensor will detect occupancy. But as mentioned earlier, because this solution only uses a PIR sensor, the mailbox status will need to be reset manually once you've collected your post. For solution 3, you're going to use the PIR sensor in conjunction with another door sensor. The PIR sensor will just be placed here, and that will detect when mail has arrived. And when I open the door, the contact sensor will know the post has been collected. You might be wondering what happens when you open the mailbox to collect your post, because the PIR sensor will detect motion again. Don't worry, we'll solve that later. Now that we've placed the contact sensors on the mailbox, we're going to want to confirm the entity state is changing when you open and close the flap or open and close the door. From Home Assistant, if you go into Settings, Devices and Services, and then select the Entities tab, and we're going to do a search for Mailbox Door, and it's going to be this one here, and there you can see the current state. And you're also going to do a search for the mailbox flap, which you can see here as well. If you were using the PIR sensor, then it'd be mailbox motion. And you're just waiting to see if that state changes when you open a door. I'm just going to quickly transition to a recording where if I open and close the door or open and close the flap, you can see the state changing. Now, if I open up this mailbox flap, you should see the state change from closed to open, which it's doing now. When I close the flap, it should change to closed, which it has. And now I'm going to just open up the mailbox door to make sure that opens, and now I'm going to close it. So that's looking good. Now that we've confirmed the sensors are working correctly, the next step is to create a few helpers. These will be used by the automations to keep track of the mailbox status and make it easier to manage each of the different solutions. Some of these helpers are shared across all three solutions, while others are only required for a specific solution. Rather than splitting into 3 separate sections, I'll walk you through creating all of the helpers together. As we go along, I'll point out which solution each helper is required for, so you can simply skip any that don't apply to your setup. Let's get back into Home Assistant and create them. From Home Assistant, if you go into Settings, Devices and Services, then click on Helpers, Create Helper, do a search for Toggle. This first helper you're going to use in either of the 3 solutions. We'll give it the name Mailbox Full. What this will do is toggle between on and off when mail has been received. And we're also going to give it the following icon. I will be putting a link in the description to all of these icon files. Now you're going to click Create. And if I just do a quick search for Mailbox Full, you can see that is the helper. If you go into Settings, and that is the Entity ID here. Make note of that because you will use it later when we create the automation. Now we're going to create the second helper, and this will apply to both solutions 1, 2, and 3. If you click Create Helper, this time do a search for Template and select Sensor. We're going to give this the name Mailbox Status, and in the state section you're going to paste in this following condition. I will be sharing this so you don't need to make note of it. What this is going to do is when the helper that we created earlier, which is input boolean mailbox full, turns to on, it's going to set the status of this mailbox status to full, otherwise it will be empty. If we click submit and then finish, we're now going to do a search for that mailbox status helper. And if you click into it, then go to settings, we're also going to give this an icon as well. So just under icons, if you paste this in, I like this icon because it's just a kind of letter with a search, as if it's looking for the status. It's the closest one I could find that seems appropriate. And under Entity ID, just make note of that value because, again, you'll be needing it later when creating the automation. Now we're just going to click Update. Now, if you're going to be following solution 3, which is using a combination of the PIR motion sensor to detect mail, and you're going to use the door sensor so that when you open the door to collect mail, you're also going to need a third helper. If you click Create Helper, do a search for Toggle. We're going to give this one the name Mailbox Door Opened, and we're going to use this particular icon. It might not be very clear in this video, but it's basically an icon of a postbox, and you can sort of vaguely see the flag is down, but the door is actually open. Now we're going to click Create. And if you just do a search for that helper as well. If you click on Settings, and again, just make note of this Entity ID section here, because if you are following solution 3, you will need that value when creating the automation. The next step is completely optional, but we're going to add the mailbox status entity to your Home Assistant dashboard. This provides a quick and easy way to see whether your mailbox is currently empty or full. If you're following the PIR only solution, I'm going to configure the tile so that tapping it toggles the mailbox status. This provides a convenient way to manually reset the mailbox after you've collected your post. If you're following either of the other solutions, it's still useful as it gives you a quick way to manually override the mailbox status if you ever needed to. From Home Assistant, if you go onto the top right and select Edit Dashboard, then if I just scroll down, and I'm going to add another section. And if I just click on these 3 dots, I want to delete this part because I don't want it to actually have a title. Now I'm going to click on the Add Card. And if I do a search for Mailbox Status, and we want this one here, which is the Mailbox Status Sensor, then click on it. And now we're going to add the touch button option. So if we hover over those 3 dots, or you can click in here, it seems to be the same outcome. and you're going to find this section here called Interaction. Expand that, and under Tap Behavior, we're going to select Perform Action. And then for action, if you just search for Boolean, and the one we want is Toggle Input Boolean. Then we're going to add a target, and the target is Mailbox 4. This is one of the helpers we would have created earlier so that when post arrives, the Mailbox 4 goes to on, and when it's collected, it goes to off. So we're going to select that. And just before I click Save, what you can do for your reference is if I select Show Code Editor, this is the actual code that we're going to be using. I'll save that in case you end up using it, because if you have got the same entities, it might be useful. Now I'm going to click Save, and that is the status of the mailbox, and it will be a button. Just before I click Done, which is over here, I'm just going to very quickly show you how to add it using the code. So if I was to go to one of these sections and create a new one, now if I hover over this particular part, or that bit here, and if I click Show Code Editor, I can actually paste in that code I showed you earlier, and then it appears. So depending on your setup, how close it's to mine, you could just do that last few seconds instead. I'm just going to delete that last bit because it's a duplication. And then I'm just going to click that Done button. And now you can see I've got the mailbox status showing here. So I currently know at the moment there's no post in my letterbox. And when I click on it, I can then change it to full. And if I click on it again, I can change it to empty. So this is really helpful in case you want to manually overwrite it, or if you are following solution 2, which is only using the PIR motion sensor, then once you've collected your post, in order to manually reset the state, this is how you would do it. Now it's time to create the automations. Depending on which hardware setup you've chosen, there are 3 different automation solutions. If you skipped to this part of the video, here's a quick recap. Solution 1 uses 2 Zigbee contact sensors. One is fitted to the letterbox flap to detect when new post has been delivered, while the second is fitted to the mailbox door and automatically resets the mailbox status once you've collected your post. Solution 2 uses a single PIR motion sensor. This detects when new post has been delivered and updates the mailbox status, but because it doesn't know when the mailbox has been emptied, you'll need to reset the mailbox status manually. Solution 3 combines a PIR motion sensor with a Zigbee contact sensor on the mailbox door. The PIR sensor detects when new post has arrived, while the contact sensor automatically resets the mailbox status when you collect it. I'll be creating an automation for all 3 of these solutions, so if you're only interested in one particular setup, feel free to use the timestamps to jump to the relevant section. We'll start with solution 1. Back into Home Assistant, if you go to Settings, Automations and Scenes, Create Automation, Create New Automation, and click on these 3 dots here and select Edit in YAML. And I'm just going to paste in this example code, which will be shared. Starting from the top, you've got these 2 triggers. The first trigger is when your mailbox flap will go from off to on. That's going to trigger ID 1. And the second trigger is your mailbox door sensor, which is when you collect your mail. When that goes from off to on, it's going to trigger ID 2. You'll need to change both of these entity IDs here to reflect the entity IDs of your Zigbee door sensors. And the second part is the actual actions that are going to happen. For this one here, when your mailbox flap is opened, it will set the trigger ID to 1, and your input boolean that you would have created earlier, which is going to be your mailbox full boolean, is going to turn on. And for the second condition is when the mailbox door is opened to collect your mail, it will trigger ID 2 and it will set the input boolean of your mailbox full to off. And when these input booleans toggle from off to on, the helper of the mailbox status will then change between empty and full. It's up to you if you want to add something in here so that when your mail is full, you might want a notify.mobile to appear. I'm just leaving this so it's just going to change the state of the input booleans, and then you can sort of choose what you want to do from there. But I may list some example automations in GitHub that you can use if you want to. I'm just going to fast forward, so I've changed the entity IDs to values which are real. So now you can see I've got the correct binary sensor value, door contact sensor, and so on. And then you would just click save for the automation to apply. Just before I do that, if you click on these three dots here and select edit in visual editor, you can also see a visual representation of how this is working. You've got the top one, which is the mailbox flap is opened. So you can see here it's got mailbox flap as the entity. It's when it goes from closed to open, it's going to set the trigger ID to 1. And if I click on the one below, this is referring to the door when you collect your mail. So the state will change from closed to open, and it's going to set the trigger ID to 2. And then you've got this choose between options selection. So you've got option 1 and option 2. So if I click on option 1, at the moment it's just changing the input boolean. So you've got here is the input boolean turn on, and it's just selecting mailbox full to on. And then for option 2, it's going to basically do the opposite. The input boolean is going to turn off, which is the mailbox full. If you did want that to trigger some kind of a notification, you could always, if I just go back into option 1, where you would actually receive the mail, you might want to add an action in here, perhaps a notify or something, or maybe have a light turn on, so it perhaps may be of more use. Once you're happy with that, you can then just click save and your automation's ready to go. Now let's move on to solution 2. This solution uses a single PIR motion sensor to detect when new post has been delivered, but because it doesn't know when you've collected your post, you'll need to reset the mailbox status manually. If we go into settings, automations and scenes, create automation, create new automation, and if you click on these three dots and select edit in YAML, and I'm just going to paste in this example code. So this section here is going to be the trigger. When the state changes of your PIR motion sensor from off to on, it's going to set the trigger ID to 1. And for the action here, it's going to change the state of your input boolean mailbox full to on. This will essentially let you know that you've got post, but again, you will need to manually reset it. You will need to change these values of your PIR sensor and also the value of your input boolean, which you should have got earlier from the video. I'm just going to update these to actual entity ID values. So they have now been updated. And if I just click on these three dots here and select edit in visual editor, you can see the when value is the trigger, which is when mailbox occupancy changes from clear to detected. So you can see there, that's the from and that's the to, and that's where the entity ID goes. And for the actual action, it's just going to change the input boolean to on, which is mailbox full. If you did want it to do more than just that, opposed to a change in state, You might want to add an action here to maybe turn on a light or trigger some kind of notification. Once you're happy with that automation, you're just going to click Save. Now let's move on to solution 3. This solution uses a PIR motion sensor to detect when new post has been delivered and a Zigbee contact sensor on the mailbox door to automatically reset the mailbox status when you've collected your post. If you go to Settings, Automations and Scenes, Create Automation, Create New Automation, and if you click on these 3 dots and select Edit in YAML, I'm just going to paste in this example code which will be shared. Starting from the top, you've got these 2 triggers. The first one is referring to your PIR motion sensor. So when the state changes from off to on, it's going to change the trigger ID to 1. The second trigger is referring to your door contact sensor. So when you open the door to collect your mail and the state changes from off to on, it's going to set the trigger ID to 2. Now for this condition, it's a little bit more complicated, and some of you have probably already identified this problem as I'm describing this automation. Because we're using a PIR motion sensor, as soon as you open the mailbox door to collect the post, the PIR sensor is going to trigger, and it's going to then tell you that you've got mail even though you're actually collecting the mail. So the way we've got around this is we've created an additional helper that was made earlier, which is your mailbox door opened. And what's going to happen is when you open that door, the automation is going to very quickly change the mailbox door opened to the state of on, and it'll wait 15 seconds and then change it back to off. And we've also added a 5-second delay so that when the PIR detects mail, instead of it immediately changing the state of your mailbox full to on, it's actually going to have a 5-second delay, which gives the opportunity of the mailbox door open state to change before it checks that. And then it's going to check the state here just to confirm that the mailbox door opened is set to the state of off. If that's set to off, then it will proceed to the next action here, which will change the input boolean of mailbox full to on. If you have opened the door within the last 15 seconds and the PIR sensor triggers, because this state would have been on, it's not going to do anything and it won't then say you've got mail. If I just scroll down a little bit further, so this second condition is when you're opening the mailbox door to collect your post. Trigger ID will be 2, and it's going to set the input boolean to off, which is your mailbox full, so that will now let you know that your mailbox has been collected. It's also going to turn on the input boolean of the mailbox door opens, and it will remain at that for 15 seconds. This is where you've got the 15-second pause, and right at the bottom afterwards, you've then got mailbox door opened, which is this part here, is then going to go back to off. Hopefully I've done a good enough job of explaining it, but essentially, if I just wrap this up, when post arrives in your letterbox, the PIR sensor is going to wait 5 seconds, check the state of your mailbox door opened, and if it's set to on, it's going to do nothing. If it's set to off, it's then going to change the state of your mailbox to let you know that you've got post. And then when you go to collect your post and you open the mailbox door, it's going to change the input boolean of mailbox full to off, which obviously resets the mailbox status, but it will additionally change the mailbox door opened to on, wait 15 seconds, and then turn it back off. I've tested this and it does work. I'm just going to quickly update those values to true values. So it's now going to look something like this, where all the entity IDs and so on have been updated. If I just click on these 3 dots and select Edit in Visual Editor, you can see here is a visual representation of how it works. So you've got these 2 triggers, When mailbox occupancy changes from cleared to detected, and that's referring to the PIR sensor, it's going to change the trigger ID to 1. And then you've got here, which is referring to the mailbox door. This is where you collect your post. It's going to set the trigger ID to 2, and this is when the state goes from closed to open of your mailbox door. Then you've got this section here, which is to choose between the two options. So you've got option 1, which is when trigger ID is set. It's going to wait 5 seconds before it does anything. Then it's going to check the state of mailbox door opened and make sure it's set to off. If it's not going to go any further. If it is off, then it's going to change the value of the input boolean mailbox full to on. And then for option 2 is more or less doing the reverse. The condition is trigger ID 2. It's then going to turn off input boolean mailbox full. It's going to turn on input boolean, which is the door is opened. It's going to wait 15 seconds, and then it's going to change that value of mailbox door opened back to closed. Once you're happy with that automation, you can then click Save. Now, for all of these automations, all they're doing is just changing the state of values. So they don't actually trigger any notifications. So if you did want it to trigger an automation, you'd want to do this under option 1, and then somewhere here under the actions, and make sure it's right at the end, because it's important it waits 5 seconds to check these conditions. So I'd put it somewhere here as an action, and maybe you want to get some kind of a notification. But if you're happy as it is, then you can just click Save and that automation's ready to go. Now that I've shown you how to create the automations, I thought I'd finish with a little bonus demonstration showing you one way you can build upon what you've just created. This desk display mailbox works alongside those automations. Rather than simply changing the mailbox status when new post arrives, it raises a mechanical flag and plays the classic "You've got mail" sound effect whenever the mailbox changes to full. For those of you who are interested, I'll be making a dedicated follow-up video covering the hardware, ESP home configuration, and automations in detail. If you'd like to get a head start, the code and wiring diagram are already available on my GitHub. Let's see it in action.
You've got mail.
Hopefully, you now have a good understanding of how to automate your external mailbox using Home Assistant. If you found this video useful, give it a like and consider subscribing so you don't miss out on any future Home Assistant projects. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.